Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
For years, mankind has asked itself a series of seemingly unanswerable questions. Why are we here? Where are we going? Where did we come from? But one question above all has always pondered the minds of mankind. That question is, who's better, Kirk or Picard? Hello and welcome to another Random Fandom. I'm your host, Mayhem, and in this episode, we're going to be seeking to answer just that very question. Who is the best Star Trek captain? Captain Kirk or Captain Picard? Now, all of the Star Trek captains throughout all the different series have had their individual strengths, and some have had their individual weaknesses as well. And they're all great in their own individual way. No, not him. Anyway, of all the captains, objectively speaking, everybody has their own favorite, and like I say, they all have their own strengths, but I think as far as all Star Trek fans are concerned, everyone can concede that the best is going to come down to either Kirk or Picard. Just by way of the immense impact both of those characters have had on the Star Trek universe as a whole, and even penetrating into the cultural zeitgeist. I mean, even people who have never seen an episode of Star Trek in their lives know who Captain Kirk and Captain Picard are, and could pick them out if they saw a picture of them. That's not so with the other captains. So even though the best is going to be either Kirk or Picard, that doesn't take anything away from the accomplishments of all of the other captains. No, I said no, not him. Anyone but him. So before we can determine who's the best between Kirk or Picard, it's only right to go through the runners-up and give them their due credit where credit is due. Alright, fine. If we're gonna start at the bottom and work our way towards the best, we have to start with Captain Archer. Because you can't take it away from him, he is a Star Trek captain, no matter how much people may dislike him. I myself do not care for him that much, but to be honest and to be totally fair, I haven't watched the entire Enterprise series. I've actually only watched the first season or so before I gave up on it completely. Now, Archer may have been a fine captain, but he was dragged down by a couple of big problems. One, he had a relatively boring crew. I mean, one of the best things about Star Trek that makes each one of the series so great is the best of the best characters. Not just the captains are great, but all of their supporting staff is great as well. And Archer had just kind of a run-of-the-mill crew of regular humans, you know? They didn't have the one lone android in all of the Federation, or the one shapeshifter in all of the Federation, or a Borg who had been deprogrammed. Didn't have any of that. He just had kind of a crew of run-of-the-mill humans who didn't really seem to have that much going for them. And then also, he had the weakest ship of all, which stands to reason because Enterprise is a prequel. It's about the first Enterprise, way back when the Federation kind of was first starting. So it stands to reason that he has a weak ship and weak technology in comparison to the other ones. But, you know, if you followed all of the Star Trek series and then going from Voyager, where the technology was great, and then jumping all the way back to Enterprise, it's kind of like getting hooked on a show that's about fights between nuclear submarines, and then there's a spin-off series about wooden sailboats. It's just a real step down. So, I mean, that first Enterprise that Archer was a captain of didn't even have phasers on the ship when they started. Didn't even really have shields that well. They didn't have teleporters. It was so weak to me. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the captain himself, Archer, was a terrible captain. Just from what I saw, though, he was kind of a run-of-the-mill captain. I didn't see anything in the one season that I watched of it that really made me sit up and say, this guy's really cool. Now, maybe stuff came later on in the second, third, or fourth season, but I didn't get to see any of that because I gave up on the show by that point. So to be fair, I may not have all the facts when it comes to Captain Archer, but I think there's probably a reason why there's a running gag between Trekkies that Archer and the Enterprise series almost killed the franchise until J.J. Abrams came along and restarted it with the movies. So Archer goes on the bottom of the list, and frankly, as far as I'm concerned, the less said about him, the better. So then we move on to the captains who I actually have reverence for, and when it came to who was going to be next on the list, if I'm ranking them from worst to best, the next one was really kind of a toss-up between Janeway and Sisko. But ultimately, I decided that next on the list after Archer would be Captain Janeway. Captain Janeway, the captain of Voyager, she had a lot to deal with. She was in a rough situation at the very first episode of Voyager. Her and her entire crew got stranded on the other side of the known universe, all the way in the Delta Quadrant, where they find it would take, at maximum warp, it's going to take them 65 years to get back home. In addition to being the only Federation ship out in space that's going to take them decades to get back from, she also had her crew absolutely cut in half. Half her crew ended up either getting killed or wasn't fully on board the ship when they got sent on their first mission, so she had to fill in the rest of her crew with a bunch of terrorists. Another ship, a group of Maquis, who are space terrorists, got stranded on the other side of the universe with them, so she had to kind of absorb the terrorists and the criminals into her crew and get them all to work together. That's a lot to have to overcome. Plus having to go against all of these weird alien creatures on the other side of the galaxy that none of them have ever seen and heard about, it became quite a challenge. And also they find out that that's where the Borg originally came from. And arguably, Janeway had more confrontations with the Borg than even Picard did. So in that respect, she earns a lot of respect as far as I'm concerned. She was a great captain as far as I'm concerned. But when it comes to Sisko, who I put just a little bit higher than her, I've got two words on why Sisko is a better captain. The Dominion War. Actually, that's three words. Dominion War. There's your two words. He was kind of at the forefront of the Dominion War. And if you never got into Deep Space Nine, the story with that is Deep Space Nine is a space station. It's not a ship, so it's just parked in one spot. And it's in space to guard the one stable wormhole in the galaxy. So this kind of portal to the other end of the universe. It's the only one in existence that anybody knows about that's always there. It doesn't move. It doesn't collapse. And throughout the seasons, they find that on the other side of this wormhole, on the other side of the known universe, there's this interstellar empire called the Dominion. And basically, think about the size of the Federation, all the different planets and all the different species that are in the Federation, times 50. I mean, it's huge. It's covering an entire section of the universe. And they're not very nice people. And they basically are called the Dominion because they hold dominion over everybody around them. And they end up making an alliance with, on our side of the universe, the Cardassians, here close to the Federation. And if you don't know who the Cardassians are, basically alien Nazis are who the Cardassians are. There's hardly any good Cardassians. They're all pretty much Nazis. And the Cardassians plus the Dominion go to war with the Federation and the Klingons. And throughout the course of the Deep Space Nine series, everybody thinks that the Dominion is going to win. All the projections show that the Federation and the Klingons are going to lose, they're going to get defeated, they're going to get wiped out. But Sisko is on the forefront of that war the entire time, and ultimately ends up winning and kind of triumphing over the Dominion all on his own, with a little help from a group of really powerful interdimensional aliens called the Prophets. Sisko became kind of their emissary. A bunch of aliens called the Bajorans worshiped them as gods, and Sisko was kind of their messenger. And he kind of used his pull that he had with them to help in winning the Dominion War. And ultimately, the Federation and the Klingons triumphed over the Dominion and won that entire war. And that was probably throughout all of the Star Trek series the most difficult thing that the Federation ever had to face. The Borg were terrible. The Q that happened in The Next Generation was always trying to mess with the crew of the Enterprise was a problem as well, but probably the biggest threat that ever faced the entire Federation was the Dominion, and Sisko kind of single-handedly overcame them. So that's why I gave him a higher spot than Janeway. So now we come down to it. Who is the best captain of all, Captain Kirk or Captain Picard? And I realize no matter which one I choose, I'm going to have people saying that I'm wrong, I'm stupid, don't know what I'm talking about, but this is how I view it. In my view, the better captain is Captain Picard. So I'm going to say why I think he's a little bit better than Kirk, and to do that, I'm going to have to say a few potentially kind of negative things about Kirk, but I don't want to take anything away from Captain Kirk. He is amazing, he's a great captain, he's a very close second on my list, but here's the things about Captain Kirk that I find a little shaky. Kirk is to Star Trek what Tom Cruise was to Top Gun. He's a maverick character. And in a lot of situations, a lot of the time, that works out very well. In fact, in the original series, that was what he was supposed to be. Kind of the crazy, don't play by the rules kind of guy who just is good enough to get the job done. And it was Spock who was supposed to be the by-the-book character. So it was kind of like an interstellar odd couple, and it worked out really well. But when you really think about it, that's not what you want in a captain. That kind of maverick sensibility is what you want in a hotshot pilot. That's maybe what you want in an ensign who is really trying to make a name for himself, you know? The crazy, don't play by the rules type really works as an underling, and then the person who's at the top of the command chain needs to be the responsible one, needs to be the by-the-book one, because ultimately, all of the responsibility for everything they do goes back to him, goes back to the captain. So you kind of want a stoic, rule-driven kind of character. And also, when it comes to Kirk, the best thing about him, the thing he is most known for, the thing he is most famous for, the Kobayashi Maru, was a cheat. He is famous for being the best cheater in the Federation. He cheated on a test that was designed to test the person's character, to see how they dealt with failure. And by cheating in it, he invalidated the entire test. Now, if you were to cheat on your final back when you were in college, or if you're yet to be in college, if you cheat on your final in college, you're not going to get a handshake from your professor and say, good job in figuring out a novel way to beat the system. No, you're going to get kicked out of school. So, you know, you can say that, well, you know, he figured out an interesting way to solve the problem and it showed ingenuitive thinking, and that's all well and good, but still, he's still a cheater. He's best known for being the universe's greatest cheater. And I don't really think that's what you want in a captain figure. On the other hand, Picard, brilliant strategist. If you've ever seen any of the Star Trek The Next Generation movies, they often come down to a big space battle at the end where it's Picard commanding the Enterprise against a much more powerful opponent, and Picard ends up winning just because he's that brilliant of a strategist. But beyond that, he's also a diplomat. If you ever watch Next Generation, he speaks a dozen different alien languages and knows a bunch of alien customs, so he can broker peace between alien groups that don't like each other. So he's a diplomat, he's a historian. That's what he actually does as a hobby. He knows all kinds of stuff about alien civilizations and alien histories just because he enjoys it. So he's highly intelligent, highly professional, and even though he is by the book, he's also very guided by his morals. So it's not like if Starfleet tells him to destroy a group of revolting aliens that he's just going to go and do it. That's what the entire movie Star Trek Insurrection was about. Starfleet was kind of the bad guys in that one, and the entire movie was about Picard and his crew rebelling against them and disobeying orders. So, you know, I can't really think of a bad thing to say about Picard. He's professional, but he's also a great strategic analyst. He's guided by his morals, but he also believes in the chain of command and following the rules. He kind of combines the best parts of both Kirk and Spock, as far as I'm concerned. So I know, again, it kind of seems like I'm picking on Captain Kirk and saying a bunch of negative things about him, but I really do admire everything he did throughout his time as captain of the Enterprise, and certainly can't take away all of his great accomplishments. And I really do enjoy the J.J. Abrams movies where they're back to the original crew. And I think Chris Pine is doing a very admirable and competent job playing Captain Kirk and bringing that character to an entirely new generation. But when it comes to who is ultimately the best Star Trek captain, I have to give it to Captain Picard. If you disagree and you like Kirk better, that's absolutely fine. If you like one of the other captains the best and you think one of those other ones is arguably a better captain, shoot me a comment down below and let me know why you think that is the way it is. And thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time on the next edition of Random Fandom.